These juicy nugs are the favorite food
Wait,
of an
Mark Rober!
incredibly intelligent crow. But they're
Wait, the crow eats chicken nuggets? I feel like it shouldn't be allowed to do that. Yeah, that's fucked up, or I'm down to watch
being
this.
defended by this bird cage. Because if she wants to gain access to the nugs, she'll need to first solve the 9 increasingly difficult puzzles I designed to
Chickens eat chickens?
This crow escape
They shouldn't be
room
allowed to do that
gauntlet is
either.
Extremely challenging. So challenging, in fact, for comparison, I had some young humans also attempt to solve the exact same puzzles with fascinating results.
Whoa.
But just like with my backyard squirrels, I will admit that
squirrels.
in hindsight, I completely underestimated my adversary. Now, juicy nugs might seem like an odd choice, but if you look closely, you could spot the exact moment my personal vendetta against the crows started about a year ago. Did you catch it? I'll play it back, but this time, watch right here.
Oh.
The crows had figured out I DoorDash food to my porch on an embarrassingly regular basis. So when a car rolled up to my house and a person got out, it meant dinner was served.
Oh shit!
And this continued on for
He's
nearly
stealing
every
the
delivery,
Chick-fil-A.
until it all came to a head one day when they once again decided to go for my nugs.
Bro. That's some devious bird shit. Holy.
But this time, instead of giving up like a quitter, I reordered my food because I was
Poor
really
Mark.
angry and hungry. And this is when I realized I was in over my head. Because I was no longer just having my food stolen by a crow, I was being bullied by a crow, as he just knocks over my drink and flies off.
Not the lemonade!
In fact, I'm no crow translator, but if you play that back at double speed, that's a bully's laugh if I've ever heard it.
Are you serious?
And the true irony here is of the 8 billion people on the planet, mine was quite possibly the worst porch for them to be stealing from. Because I spent the better part of 7 years seeking revenge on a different
Damn, that's
species
some nice
that was
grass.
stealing from my porch.
Oh yeah, the
In
porch
form of
pirates.
fake packages, fine glitter, and copious amounts of fart spray.
Oh. Alright.
And so at this point, I needed answers. I wanted to know if I was really being targeted here. Like, actually, how smart is a crow? And after even a minimal amount of research, it turns out really, really smart. From playing an instrument,
Wow, they're so
understanding
talented!
and
Yo, faint
manipulating
smiles, thanks for 6
objects.
months.
to straight up psychological warfare, where you see this crow here wants some water, but the big bad vulture is currently being a water hog. So he sneaks up behind him and plucks out a feather, literally framing the poor other vulture who gets chased off as this genius instigator gets what he wants.
Ray, thanks for 7
to
months.
fully test
Wow,
the
and he
theory,
gets
I
it all
was
to himself.
deliberately being picked on by all my neighborhood crows. I found a crow named
Wow,
Cheryl
crows
at
are really
a bird rescue
smart.
sanctuary to represent their species as I tested the limits of their intelligence. And like any good scientist would, we started off with the first step of the scientific method, by just observing her with some cameras we placed in her enclosure. It was really interesting to see how her curiosity would drive her to figure out clever ways to interact with the objects in her environment,
Oh!
occasionally motivated by a strategic
She can use a
treat. It became
scale!
clear she had a few favorite objects she loved to play with, like this wooden ball, as she demonstrated a surprisingly deep understanding of cause and effect. So after a couple months of observation and study, a plan had now formed to test their species with a 9-part escape room gauntlet, which meant the only thing left at this point was to put that plan into action with a 10-second build montage.
Holy. He's making an escape room for birds, bro. He's
Here are the
crazy.
basic elements. For starters, I've placed her favorite combo meal right here on this table. From sad experience, I know when she enters this room, the first thing she'll be drawn to are the juicy nugs. But it will be impossible
The
for her
chicken.
to access them because of this reverse bird cage that's meant to keep birds out. And the only way for this bird cage to
Genius.
autonomously unprotect the nugs is if she solves all 9 of our puzzles, starting first right here on this desk. Because this is where Cheryl will find
This
a
is so
graduated
fucking
cylinder
cool.
with her favorite wooden ball that's too far down for her to reach directly with her beak. So here's the question. If you're a crow, how would you solve this puzzle given all the materials you have at your disposal here on the table? Well, if you said you would take the heavy rocks and you would add them one at a time to raise the water level, you'd be right. So Cheryl will have to come to the same conclusion.
Smart.
In addition to not using any of the other decoy materials like the cork or the cotton balls that would just float uselessly on the surface.
Then
Once
it's
she has
harder
enough
to get
rocks
the
to get the
ball.
ball, the water level will now be high enough to complete the electrical circuit with these 2 pieces of copper tape. That then sends a signal to an Arduino. This puzzle has been sufficiently solved, and after a few seconds time delay, a light
Holy shit, it's
automatically
all
turns on,
automated.
leading her to the next puzzle, aka
God
the
damn.
Scales of Justice. After seeing videos like this where the crows are interacting with human-made objects and tools, in this case to get water, we present her with a scale to see if she can figure out how to use it. Once again, there are objects on the table to choose from, and if she adds enough of them to one side, it will tip the scales, triggering this limit switch here, indicating the puzzle is solved, which will activate the lights on the Scooby-Doo portrait roulette. The goal for this puzzle is to assess their
Oh my
facial
God, Mr.
recognition
Beast.
capabilities. Because I remember seeing a study where researchers captured and tagged a set of crows wearing a specific mask,
Yeah,
and then
L-pop
later
hybrids.
released them. So after that, the crows would dive bomb and attack anyone wearing that mask. But even more interestingly, they were still doing it a decade later. Meaning if a crow doesn't
A
like
crow
you for some
never
reason,
forgets.
they will remember your face and pass that vendetta on for generations. In our case, we left a picture
That's
of me in
fucking
Cheryl's home
crazy.
enclosure, and every time she pulled on the leather strap underneath the picture of my face, she would get a treat. So to see if she remembers my face,
Oh my God, he's
even in different
brainwashing
clothes,
the
we'll rotate
birds to
through
like
these
him.
portraits that include decoys like Kevin the Backyard Scientist, and some guy who made a cameo in my lemon battery video.
Oh,
Delicious.
wow.
Refreshing. Organic.
Not worth 10 hours?
Amazing.
12 hours?
Totally worth it.
And if she pulls on the leather strap
I haven't
and
seen
rings
that
the
video.
bell associated with my face, the piezoelectric sensor on the back will sense the vibration, and some money will flutter down from the ceiling, at which point we once again rotate the Scooby-Doo portraits. Then once she's correctly picked me 3 times in a row, she can move on to the next puzzle called the cash grab. The idea here was to mimic the videos where people train crows to go out and retrieve money they find lying around and then exchange it for a treat. In our case, all
Oh my
dollar
God,
bills have NFC
they
chips
teach
on them,
the
and money
birds to
collection box
pick
has an
pickpockets
NFC
for
reader near
them.
the opening. So if the reader registers all $3 bills have been added, it
Can a
tells that
bird
the
go to
microcontroller
jail?
That activates a servo motor that opens this door, revealing a tool. Now, on the off chance she even makes it this far, Cheryl has to grab that tool and bring it to the next puzzle, aka the fishing hole. The inspiration for this puzzle was from this fascinating video I saw where a crow took a piece of bread that would have been a fine meal on its own, but instead it used the bread as bait to lure a fish to upgrade to a much better meal. And then in another video, I saw a crow use a stick as a tool to remove a tasty worm out of a hole. So here, Cheryl will first
that a
need to
worm?
figure out how to
That
bend
didn't look like
the
a worm.
end part of this tool into a hook shape, after which she has to stick it in here and fish out the cup. Now the whole container system here is supported by a strain gauge continuously measuring the weight of the system. So when it registers it's lighter by exactly 1 cup, the next puzzle lights up. And this was a pretty straightforward cup stack challenge, and it's something we saw a lot of examples of online, including with Cheryl herself in her free play. The engineering here is pretty clever though, with an inner and outer copper ring in each cup, so as they stack up, the electrical circuit gets closer and closer to being completed. And when she has the final cup she retrieved from the fishing hole, it completes the circuit, lighting up an old classic throwback from the squirrel obstacle course, you guessed it, the tourist trap. This is sort of designed as a reprieve and a little bit of a fun break for the final 2 puzzles. And lest you think crows don't like to have fun, I'll direct your attention to this crow repeatedly sledding down this roof, and this crow and his buddy swinging from this branch like Tarzan. Here, of course, when she
They're
sticks
just like
her head
little
through the
babies.
hole, allowing us to take her adorable picture, she's rewarded with an appetizer portion of a juicy nug to whet her palate and give her the strength to go the distance, which she'll need to face the penultimate challenge, aka the shipwreck. The idea behind this puzzle came from seeing crows coordinate their beaks and feet sort of like this. So Cheryl has to pull the cork off and then continue pulling up on the string, pinning it under her foot the whole time until she's pulled enough of the string for the ship to teeter backwards,
Turbo!
triggering this tilt
31
switch,
months.
sending the signal.
I'm actually
to activate
excited
the
for
final
Dark Souls
challenge.
2.
The egg drop. The concept
It's been
here
a
came
while.
from probably the most incredible example of crow intelligence in the wild that I stumbled upon in my research, where in order to crack open an impossibly hard walnut, they would first drop the walnut into the street directly above the crosswalk. Then cars would drive by cracking the nut, at which point the crows would wait for the crosswalk
Wait,
to
they're
turn,
so
then safely
smart.
hop out to collect their delicious reward. So inside our egg, there's an
Using
IR emitter.
cars as
But in order to
nutcrackers.
access that, instead of teaming up with cars in a crosswalk, Cheryl will need to team up with our buddy Isaac Newton, harnessing the power of gravitational potential energy to break it open. Because if she manages to do that, after somehow solving all the other 8 puzzles as well, then this IR emitter will trigger this IR sensor hidden at the base of the table, which will give the final signal to raise the bird cage, earning her the right to gorge on her well-deserved combo meal for as
15
long as
months.
she wants, without any fear of me chasing her off my porch. I should mention, by the
Wow,
way,
a
this
full
beautiful
Chick-fil-A
bird cage
meal
was
for
custom
her.
built for me by my Mythbuster buddy Adam Savage, and he made a really cool build video for it over on his
Bro,
YouTube channel
I
called
fucking
Tested. You should
loved
totally check it out.
Mythbusters when I was a
with the maze all
kid.
set up, I just needed to lure Cheryl to the study, and I knew just the
Mythbusters
trick,
was so
at which
good.
point all I had to do was wait. And I didn't have to wait long. And I
Oh,
should
shit,
mention,
she's
while I
here.
do have an affinity for testing species like crows, squirrels, and even octopi, my favorite species is humans. So I invited a few of them out to serve as a control group before Cheryl made her official attempt. Okay, to get the juicy nugs, you gotta solve 9 puzzles in this room. Any questions? Go. And their problem-solving skills kicked in right away.
I see light.
Is a bird smarter than a child?
Doors? Nothing. Hold on, wait. Think like a crow.
To retrieve the wooden ball, they started by just trying to utilize all the various objects on the table.
So we got a cork, pom-pom balls, rocks.
And it was really cool to see them trying a bunch of different things, totally unafraid of failure.
We need to find one that's long enough so that it'll push the water in and then it'll rise up.
While learning a little more with each unsuccessful attempt.
Maybe we put the rocks in and make the water go up?
Oh yeah.
Until
Oh
finally,
yeah.
More rocks.
they earned the eureka moment.
I got it.
Yes.
At the second puzzle, they started to recognize some patterns and pick up some confidence and momentum. On puzzle 3, immediately demonstrating their own excellent facial recognition skills, with perhaps my favorite line of this whole video.
Hey, I reckon it's Backyard Scientist, the guy who helped with the lemon guy, and Mark Rober.
On this one, they couldn't reach the bell, so they tried a very novel approach that didn't quite work,
Just barely.
Couldn't we use this?
but it inspired a solution that did.
Oh, money!
Sort of.
Oh no.
How are we supposed to get that? We're not birds of prey.
And trying different things and knowing that failure is part of the process is what it means to think like an engineer. This is such an important skill to develop for life. It's written right on the side of every Crunch Labs build box that gets delivered to your door every
Hashtag
month,
ad.
where we build a really fun toy together and learn about the fascinating physics that make
Oh, yeah, that's a
it work.
cool
The best
ad,
part
though.
is, just like
It's
I
his
try
own
to do with
product,
my YouTube
too.
videos, we hide the vegetables, so you're learning all these useful life skills like resilience, but every step of the journey is still really fun.
Of course he slips it
Plus,
out. Well, he
all
has to
Crunch
pay
Labs
for the videos
subscribers now
somehow.
get their actual selfie taken from actual space.
The
and a
videos
chance
take
to
a lot
win
of
the
work
platinum
and money.
ticket every month to come hang out with me and my team for a day. So if you're a kid
Yo,
and
Sierra,
you're
what's
looking for
up?
something
It's
to put
like
at the top of your
OTK and
Christmas list, or
Starforge.
you're just
Yo, Sierra, I was telling them how you said I should go to the campsite. It does sound fun.
looking to be the household hero by gifting it to someone else,
I would
use the
go
link
to
in the
hang
video
out.
description or head to crunchlabs.com, where we're giving away 2 free boxes for our holiday special. So you've got something even more fun to open up.
It will be so much fun, dude.
Yeah.
Then some juicy.
I do
We
want
gotta
to
get out
go.
before Mark gets here.
Wait, I have a question though, Seer. Are the showers and like can you like wash your face and it's not gross? Because I'm imagining they just have like outdoor water pumps or something, and like I have to not feel greasy. Or maybe I just don't shower for one night and it's fine. The showers are free, good quality, and hot and private. Hot and private, right?
Now back
I know
to
what you
Cheryl.
meant. Hot and
Just as I
private.
suspected, the irresistible prize inside the
Yeah,
birdcage
I'm down to go see her.
caught her immediate
sounds fun.
attention. I can't blame her for trying the brute force shortcut, which of course comes up short. And as she steps back and surveys the situation, you can tell she knows this isn't going to be easy.
Bird time. Do
So
you
she
want a
starts
cold
out
shower?
with a lap
No.
around the room, which admittedly was not very informative. At which point she remembers she has wings and starts checking things out from a higher vantage point. And you can almost see her trying to work things out as she recognizes variations on a few elements and toys
Oh,
from
she's
her
already
enclosure. Because we tried to
studying.
model some of the puzzles after them. But even still, ultimately she was left scratching her head on how to proceed until we officially kicked things off by lighting up the first puzzle, which piqued her interest enough to investigate further, and that's when she
Oh.
noticed her favorite wooden ball. And just as I'd hoped, she immediately tried to retrieve it, but came up just short. So the question was, what would she do next? And this was the first moment I realized my nugs might be in trouble. Because just like the
Was
kids,
she mad? What was
surveyed all
that?
the
She went
items at her disposal on the table. But unlike the kids,
She was stomping her
settled
feet.
immediately on the right answer.
Oh!
And right as I was thinking she was going to smoke the kids in this competition, she recalibrated my expectations with a reminder that anatomically speaking, she was still in fact working with the brain the size of a grape as she dropped a rock into the cork dish. But then after realizing this wasn't quite
Wait
right,
a
she
second.
corrected herself by placing the rock into the empty beaker. After which, to her credit, she refocused her efforts. And it
Oh,
didn't
great
take much
brain
longer to
working
get to
hard.
this point where she very cleverly used the bobbing action from the buoyancy
Yo,
force of the
Lime,
ball
thank
to
you for
save
the sub,
herself a
welcome.
few more
Hello.
rock drops. And with that, the sensor was tripped and puzzle number 2 was illuminated,
Oh, wow.
indicating
Not
it was time
bad.
to move on. Cheryl had a setup fairly similar to the scales of justice in her enclosure at home, so this was more of an underhanded softball pitch to allow her to build up some momentum. And sure enough, she got right to work.
Smart
At which
thinking.
point she immediately quit work to try and force the balance beam into the completed position. But since the limit switch needs a sustained contact before lighting up the next puzzle, she ditched that plan with a return to her more conventional efforts.
She tried to get lazy and,
And
take
she was
shortcuts.
surprisingly picky at which coins she wanted to add to the dish.
Not that one.
So picky, in fact, that adorably she went back to get her favorite wooden ball to add
Aw.
to the tray. And look, not to nitpick, because she was doing great, but she displayed a fairly rudimentary grasp on the relative densities between a wooden ball and a metal coin, as she
Cute.
seemed sort of incredulous that wouldn't do the trick. But after one more coin, and a bit of an assist that I'm gonna let slide, limit switch was triggered, moving us on to puzzle 3,
She
the
did it!
Scooby-Doo portrait roulette. And right away, she seemed to recognize my face from her enclosure back home, because she immediately started cawing a bunch at my
Wait, it's
picture.
the snack guy.
And once again, while I don't speak crow, I'm pretty sure this
This is so
translates to,
cute.
you're way more handsome than the lemon guy. Once she sufficiently expressed her feelings, she rang the bell under my picture, triggering the piezoelectric sensor, sending a dollar bill fluttering down. Now, we seen her stuff paper into tissue boxes back in her home enclosure, so to help nudge her in the right direction, the lights to the cash grab turned themselves on.
She can see the lights.
And after a bit of poking around, she figured out what to do by putting the money in the box. At which point, nothing happened. And as you can see, this confuses Cheryl. And then it frustrates Cheryl as she
What
tries
now?
to find another way in. We wanted her to ring the bell a total of 3 times to prove that picking my face once wasn't a fluke. So eventually, when no new lights come on and nothing happens, she makes her way back to the Scooby-Doo portrait roulette to troubleshoot things.
It's like, wait a second.
Eventually, she rings the bell under my face once more, letting the dollar bill flutter by. And then one final time, only on this one, making an incredible Dude Perfect worthy mid-air grab right at the warning track. From there, it was pretty straightforward for her to stash
Wow,
both
impressive.
of the final bills.
Dang, she's talented. Oh my gosh.
Registering a completion of the puzzle through the NFC reader, giving her both a jump scare and the tools she needed for puzzle 5.
Wait,
the
she's
fishing.
actually really
Unfortunately
cute.
for Cheryl, she hops on over
She has
to
a
the
lot of
newly lit
personality.
puzzle without realizing this is a bring your own pole type of situation, which
So
once
cute.
again puts
Oh,
her
she's
at a
getting
dead
mad
end.
again.
But at this point, she seemed to have an understanding of the cause and effect relationship between the puzzles. So she scoots herself back over to the cash grab, grabs the tool, and then makes her way back. And on her
Oh,
first
she got the
attempt,
hook.
She tries to sort of wedge the cup with the stick, which clearly wasn't going to work. Which leads to what is quite possibly one of the coolest things I have ever seen. As she goes full-on blacksmith mode, hammering away, fashioning the end of the stick into a hook, at which point she drops it back in
What?
and successfully retrieves the cup. This, of course, is
Wait,
registered by the
what?
strain gauge, which
She's so
communicates with the
smart.
microcontroller, paving the way to the cup stack. And I knew this would likely be one of the easier
Wow.
puzzles for her, since she played with a similar toy a bunch at home. The trick would be if she could figure out the final cup in the stack was the one she caught from the previous puzzle. And sure enough, without too much difficulty, she stacks the first cup, and with just a little more
Okay.
difficulty, she stacks the second one. But once again, when no new lights come on, she quickly figures out our clever trick and out-clevers us. Retrieving the top cup and bringing it back to complete the
So
complicated
smart.
circuit, allowing her to move on to the crowd favorite, the tourist trap.
Yes!
Cheryl had earned every
Time
bit
for
of a
her
break by
little
somehow making
little
it
treat.
this far.
The
Plus, I
midway
figured she could use a
reward.
little caloric nugget boost to give her the energy and motivation to finish this out. And in exchange for all that, she did not disappoint with the snapshot worthy of a postcard, which meant it was on to the penultimate
Cute.
puzzle, the shipwreck. And the calorie boost seemed to pay off because without a whole lot to interact with here, she pretty quickly figured out she should just pull out the cork, showcasing her very skillful beak-claw coordination in the process.
Wow!
And as soon as she pulled it out far enough to teeter the ship, the tilt switch passed on the input signal, revealing to the room the final boss.
The final
And of course, I've shown just
challenge.
the highlights here from all her attempts on the puzzles, but she'd somehow persevered and made it this far, which meant if she figured this out, it would be an absolute clean sweep. So after sizing up the situation and considering all the options, she comes to the correct conclusion and teams up with Gravity, exposing the IR emitter, which gives the final signal it is time for her to enjoy
She
the greatest
actually
meal
did it.
of her little feathered life. And to no one's
gets
surprise,
Chick-fil-A.
after solving all the complex puzzles in this escape room gauntlet, it was a pretty simple task to get right to the nugs.
Yay!
But before she even
Is eating a
finished
chicken
her
cannibalism
long-coveted,
for a
well-earned
crow?
reward, she
No.
delighted me with one final touching surprise as she grabbed another
She's so
nug,
happy.
slathered it in a little dipping sauce, and then offered it up, almost as a gesture of mutual respect and goodwill between our species. And I
What?
suppose in the end, whether or not my original
Wait,
crows
there's
were
no
picking on me
way.
is sort of
What?
irrelevant, because I now know they're smart enough where you don't really want to find out.
What?
So
There's
out of
no
respect to both
way.
them and my new friend Cheryl, whenever I now order food to my door, I leave a side of juicy nugs
That's
as an
cute.
offering, which
She
I hope will
dipped
put
it
me
in
in the
the
good graces
water.
of them and their posterity for years to come as they pass down tales of my
That's
generosity
a
to their
fake
future
crow. They hired that
Either way,
crow
it
for
just
the
feels
video.
good to return to my roots, feeding all
They
the
paid the
neighborhood
crow.
birds. Wait, zoom in. Here we go again.
Uh-oh.
This is Travis.
Well, lots of words.
And the reason
Wait, that
he's at a
video
loss
is
of words
so
is
good.
because
I love
his
Mark
hackback
Rober.
box happened to contain the platinum diploma,
gosh.
which means college is now free for
I haven't watched
him
one of his
or
videos in like
anyone
months.
That's awesome.
And the chance to win free college and to visit the Crunch
Does he
Labs,
have more
plus the fact
spoiler
that you
crow
get yourself
videos?
taken in space, are just a couple of perks you get automatically if you sign up for Billbox if you're a kid,
Very good.
or Hack Pack if you're a teen or adult. Nailed it.
I kinda
And
wanna
Hack
try
Pack
some of
especially
his,
makes for a great holiday gift
his
for that
little
person in
building
your life
things. They
that's
look
really
fun.
hard to shop for. Because it's basically a really fun robot in a box that gets shipped to your door where we build it together, and it meets you at your current level. So if
Very
you've never
fun.
built or coded anything before, it will be your first successful step just towards making cool stuff like you saw all throughout this video with the crows, because it works right out of the box without needing to know any
so
code.
cool.
But if you're